I know some hiring managers who always want to make sure that they graduate from a 4-year university. There are hiring managers out there who don't really care about that. You're now competing with, people who have 2 to 3 years of experience still trying to go for entry-level jobs.
Hi everybody,
everyone.
Welcome back to my channel. This is a whole new setup, as you can see, and we have a special guest over, Mr.
Paul Pham.
Right now we have lights, and he brought them with him, okay, to do this whole interview. And everything's special because now, do you notice the audio is crisper because of new lav mics that we ordered. So what we're gonna do today is I'm interviewing him, a hiring manager. It's just a casual conversation, but you guys had some questions, and I thought it'd be useful for a hiring manager to share his point of view. And right now in the tech industry, it's really hard to get a job. So I thought it would be valuable for my audience to ask questions. Yeah, so we're just gonna get started. Actually, no. First, we're gonna do an introduction. Paul, what do you do, and where are you at in your career right now?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Kyla. So hey everyone, my name is Paul Pham. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm currently the engineering manager at the Trevor Project, which is a nonprofit organization which helps with suicide ideation or crisis interventions for LGBTQ plus young people. So whenever someone comes, are in crisis or have suicide ideation, they would text in, chat in, or call in, and my team will provide the services that connects them with specialized counselors to help them alleviate some of their stress, some of their crisis, things like that, to ultimately prevent them from committing suicide. And so I guess right now what I'm doing with my team is I'm currently leading a couple different teams. One is for website development, pretty much like full stack engineering, to be able to host our website, to make sure that our web chats are working properly. And the other team that I'm also leading is essentially internal tooling, or also known as like site reliability engineering per se. So we make sure that our services are up and running, making sure that we have like 99.9% uptime. So that way, if someone chats with us, they're not going to be disconnected halfway through. So essentially, thinking about the monitoring, logging, observability stuff. So those are the two teams I currently manage.
Wow, he's doing important things, you guys. That's great. And Paul has always been a driven individual, I would say, ever since I met you. So he's still a mentor to me. And we didn't talk for a while after you graduated college. And then I was living my college life. And then by the time I needed a job, he came to my rescue. But yeah, he used to work for the company I work at now. He's the one who referred me. So thank you so much for all your support. Okay. But I wanted to get into your YouTube channel. I wanted the viewers to know what you make and what are you passionate in, and what are you sharing in your YouTube channel?
Yeah, I think when I first started YouTube a while back, I did it as like a passion project, really. More so just like for fun, like learning something during the pandemic because I was kind of bored. As some people got into like reading and stuff like that, I thought, I always wanted to make YouTube videos because I've grown up like with Kev Jumba and all that,
Yes.
YouTube stars and stuff like that. So that was fun. And then I realized like I was, interested in making videos about tech because, for the most part, that's what we do most of our days during the week.
Our career.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I started off making consulting videos, particularly tech consulting, and like how to pass your, consulting interviews, things like that. And then after I left consulting, which is around the time that Kyla joined.
It was exactly the time that I joined that he left.
Yeah, it was unintended. Like it was wild because like when I saw okay, backtrack. When Kyla was like finishing her bootcamp and stuff like that, I think she like attended like some LinkedIn events.
Yeah, it was the Hired in the Metaverse event, but it was like a virtual event, a career fair.
Yeah.
I posted the story, and then you messaged me.
I was like, wait, is she looking for a job? Because we're looking to hire. And so after that, got her connected, and now we're here. But anyways, from there, I transitioned slowly over to actually making more tech videos that are related to your career in general for tech. So like software engineers, and then slowly transitioning to like engineering manager stuff. So right now I'm pivoting towards more of growing your career in certain ways, based on my own experiences and stuff like that. And so that's where I'm trying to shift. So my latest video is talking about my own personal experiences going through how do I get from software engineering intern to now I am as an engineering manager. So that's pretty much what I tend to talk about.
Yep. So software engineer to engineering manager in like how many years?
I think 4.5 to 5 years. Yeah.
Driven is an understatement. Okay. He's very successful. So that's why I thought, having him in this channel and speak about like his experience would be really good to know for other people. But okay, so let's move on to the questions, and I kind of categorized them as much as I could.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a few questions related to applying to jobs, right? And I think that's what the viewers want to know mainly. Since you're a hiring manager. Okay, so number one, what are you looking for in an ideal candidate?
That's a good question. I would say like it really depends, right? It depends on like what the position is for. So let's say if we were to scope it down, like I guess to decrease our scope, a little bit. If we're looking for like just a regular software engineer, like a full stack, software engineer for website development, then if that's where we're going, then I would say based on the job description, would follow like the job description with our recruiter and things like that. And it really comes down to what team that we're focusing on. Like I know for tech consultants, right? Typically, we just want a well-rounded person. But in this industry and like this environment, it's kind of like an employer's market, really, because there's so many people applying for one position. I remember when I was hiring for my web development position, I think within the first 24 hours, I got about 800 applicants applying to that one position.
So 24 hours, 800?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a lot, because the way that it compared from this year versus in 2022. In 2022, when I put out like a software engineer job description, we got like 40 people within a week.
Wow.
And so like the numbers drastically changed a lot. And so as you can tell, like there's only one position, right, for 800 people. Like that means like I have to really choose and be really like strict on my standards when I typically don't. Like if you were to ask me back in 2022, I would be like, yeah, this person like doesn't check all the boxes, but they have the potential to grow. But nowadays in this market, it's a little bit more difficult. Like you kind of have to check up all the boxes because you have a bigger talent pool, and that's how you kind of have to like work around it. So let's say in the job description, right, you need to have like JavaScript, React, things like that. And that's why I would say like if you have those experiences, then you would be a better fit ultimately.
Right. And that's for web development, right?
Yeah, for web development.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just so hard to stand out now. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And oh, you know what? I'm curious. So this isn't one of the questions. I'm just curious because for bootcamp grads, is it different now than before? Like, because of all the layoffs, there are a lot of people who did graduate from university who majored in CS. Like it wasn't as competitive before. So how would you say the chances of bootcamp grads, did they change?
I would say in essence, yes. During the time of like 2022 or like before when everyone was hiring, people were just like coming out of boot camp and they were looking for potential, and like at least for the employers, right, they were looking for like can we grow these candidates. Now like it's a little bit harder because with everyone being like, not everyone, generalizing of course, with a lot of people being laid off and stuff like that, you're now competing with people who have 2 to 3 years of experience still trying to go for entry-level jobs, right? So let's say like someone from Amazon got laid off with a year and a half of experiences, and they're applying to this junior engineer position because they can't go for the senior engineer position. So now you have like boot camps graduates trying to apply and compete for the same job as, you know, someone who got laid off from Amazon. And so from an employer perspective, it might be safer to go with someone with a year and a half experience, because you get the experiences and you don't have to pay as much in terms of like salary and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So there's that. But I have seen people, at least from what people have told me in the past, that boot camps graduates still are able to apply and get positions, but it's just a lot harder now.
Right. You know, kind of stating the obvious, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It is hard for everyone now in the tech industry, so it sucks, honestly.
Mm-hmm. It definitely does. It's like, I wish I can just like go back a couple of years
Yeah.
and just like, you know,
everything was good.
Everything was good. Everyone was just like getting hired, like left
Yeah.
and right. Well, it kind of changes from like, you know, what we call like the great resignation or something into like, you know, layoffs left and right type of thing.
Yeah, they're still going, right?
Mm-hmm.
I thought that 2024 was going to be the year where all the companies were going to recover, but
exactly.
I don't know.
That's what I was hoping too, but we'll see when that happens, because I'm looking forward to it.
yeah, because you know, we can't talk about that. Never mind. But okay, well, yeah, let's just hope for the best. You know, I hope everything goes back to normal. But yeah, okay. So the second question was, is how should my resume be formatted when applying for a job? Is there something that you look at specifically? Because Paul actually helped me with my resume when I was applying. So, and you had some really good tips. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll start off with the basics and then I'll go a little bit deeper, if that's all right. So at the base level, I would say like a typical, you know, resume would have a one-page resume, you know, detailing the important parts. I would say as a hiring manager and then like recruiter, what they usually spend the resume, like the time amount, is about less than 30 seconds for sure. And if, you know, nowadays, when I was hiring for my web dev position, I spent around like 10 seconds or less on a resume.
Wow.
Because I had to go through like, you know, 400 to 800 at once, right? And so like I didn't have the time and stuff. And so for companies that don't use like the automated like system, people actually do look at your resume, but very like limited amount of time, of course. And so that's why one page is important. Mm-hmm. And so let's say if you have less than like 10 years of experiences, one page is good. But if you have more, then that's when kind of like can expand more, but still one page is like the gold standard.
Would you say you have to limit it to, like if you did have more than 10 and it would require 2 pages, just limit it to what would fit in that page is more important than showing all those experiences, or what?
It kind of varies, right? Like if you're going for like a software engineering position, then I would say limit it. But if you're going for like higher like management, leadership, you know, roles and stuff like that, I would say list all the other ones, because it kind of contributes to who you are as a person, type of person. Because like they want to know, like if you're applying for like a engineering manager position, right? They want to know that you had software engineering experiences. You didn't just hop right into management. Right. Like you can be able to coach them through like, you know, technical complex problems and things like that.
And you're telling a story, basically.
Exactly.
In your resume. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
And so like what you mentioned, like telling a story, right? Like you want to make sure you structure your resume like as if you're reading a book, because you usually read from top to bottom. You always want to put the most interesting stuff at the top. You know, that comes right after your name, right? And so let's say like, you know, if you're currently a CS student or something like that, right? You don't have exactly a job experiences. So you would want to put your, you know, your education at first to show that you graduated or are in the midst of graduating, and then your projects come afterwards. Right. So that way you can show off like, you know, I've done this for this and this, stuff like that. So that's where you want to make sure, you know, you're putting in that order. So that way, if they're interested, they'll keep reading. But if they're not interested in the first 2 seconds of your resume, you tend to not like make them want to keep on reading, type of thing. And so it's kind of reeling them in. Like, you know how when we were like learning in high school or like, you know, middle school, kind of writing those like persuasive essays. Yeah. You kind of want to be able to have a hook and then reel them in slowly.
Yeah, that hook is always the hard part. Okay, so as a hiring manager, I'm assuming you've seen applicants, like resumes that have bootcamp, who are bootcamp grads. do you feel any different? Are you swayed by that at all in any direction?
Not exactly, but I do want to say this comes from my own, biased perspective. Of course, I'll take it with a grain of salt because there are other hiring managers who see things differently than I do. But from my side of things, like I don't personally care about if you went, to boot camp or actually graduated from, a college, 4-year college or something like that, because I have worked with people who have been through boot camp and people who have been through college, right? And some people from boot camps are like amazing, like, they're way smarter than me and stuff like that. And then there were from people who are graduate from college who don't even know how to code. So there's like those differences. So I don't really pay too much attention. I pay about like more about the resume itself, like the experiences. Like if you have like cool projects that you've done, that would speak out a little bit more. Or even different job experiences or internship experiences that would speak out more than your school or like, how you learn.
Agreed. Yeah, it really is about the experience, or at least that's what I think. I'm not a hiring manager, but I feel like experience is more important than if you graduated at a university or you're a boot camp graduate. I feel like it shouldn't matter because you're hiring them for the job, right?
Yeah.
And if they can do well, why does it matter if you graduated from university or not? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. But times are different. I guess times are different.
I guess now. Times are different. I know some people who always have that. I know some hiring manager who always want to make sure that they graduate from a 4-year university. It's like they put that as part of your job description. Like you got to be, have a bachelor's degree or something like that. But there are hiring managers out there who don't really care about that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that was really helpful. So number 3 is, how often should I follow up with a recruiter when applying to a position? And I guess this is your opinion because you're not the recruiter, but what do you think?
Yeah. I feel like being on both sides of like being, the person hiring and also have been applying to other jobs in the past. It really comes down to like, when you say follow up, do you mean like, after you apply and you follow up, or is it like after an interview?
I feel like I read this question as after an interview.
Okay.
I would follow up, right? Because I don't know
I
if
see.
I don't know. That's what I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Because from what I've seen, like once you apply, you don't really hear back unless they reach out to you, of course. But once you get an interview, like your first round with the recruiter, typically they would try to get you through the process as soon as possible, because I know like recruiters want to fill the role in a specific time. And from my experiences, like there are recruiters who get commission based on like how quickly they fill the role or like get like an offer, things like that. So that's kind of their job responsibilities, because I know nowadays recruiters are dealing with multiple positions at once. And so they want to make sure that they can do them in a timely manner, because once you put up a job position, you don't want the job position to be open for 2 months, because that means that you're not having that job duty fulfilled for 2 months. But going back to the question itself, I would say after your interview with the recruiter or like the hiring manager, they should be able to get back to you within like 3 to 5 days. Like that's like the max. Because how it usually works is that after you do an interview, the hiring manager or whoever's on the panel for an interview would really like type up the notes, like from the interview. When you ask questions, you type up the notes, and then you submit it to whatever interview application they use. Like for example, we use Lever, and so after interview, we would submit the notes, submit it, and then the rest of the team would review it, and then the recruiter would know, should we move this candidate forward or not? Because there's literally a button that says you want to proceed with the candidate.
Okay.
So the recruiter should know by the literally end of the day already, or at least the morning of.
Unless they're like you're interviewing more people for that position.
Exactly, but even then, like you would still know if you're moving forward with this candidate or not. Like as soon as you finish typing up the notes.
Right.
And so that's on the recruiter to relay that back to the candidate or something like that. So I would say still follow up with them within those time frame, so make sure that they're able to respond to you. because sometimes recruiters do go take on PTO, and sometimes they don't, communicate when to reach back to a candidate or not.
Yeah. Okay. And that whole like taking notes, and then you should be able to know by end of day, like that program you use or software you use.
Mhm.
I don't know. That is like standard procedure, you think?
In my opinion, it would be kind of standard procedure. Like whenever you interview someone, you kind of like have a preference during the interview, like at least halfway through, or at least for me. Other hiring managers could be different, but like halfway through the interview, I can have a sense like, do I want to move this person forward based on the questions that they're answering, like
Right.
things like that. Like, and then after you type up the notes, because usually you want to type up the notes after the interview is done, so that way it's fresh in your mind, and you want to make sure that you're getting the candidate the best possible experience. And from there, you would want to submit it. Some people would spend like an extra day or two just consolidating their notes, and things like that. But that's usually how it would work.
Yeah. Okay. So 3 to 5 days. If they haven't, then follow up.
Yeah.
Okay. And how do you follow up? Is it like, I've always had this question too, because is there a right way to follow up? What do you say in a follow-up email? Like, hey, you told me you'd get back to me last week, but you didn't. So am I rejected?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's always awkward when trying to follow up, because you don't want to seem too desperate for the job itself, right? Like
Exactly.
Yeah, right. So I definitely hear that. From my experiences, I don't really follow up too often, unless like I really want the job, of course. And so if that's the case, then I would just be like, hey, recruiter name, I interviewed for this position last week. I wanted to see if there are any updates from your end. And so keep it simple and precise, and just say like, thank you, and then send your like best regards or whatever.
Okay. Okay.
And
please hire me.
Yeah, you can add that too.
Okay. That's good. That's good. And number 4, this is a question that I believe many of our viewers would want to know the answer to. It's an open-ended question though. Do you have advice for people looking for jobs right now with all the layoffs that have and are still happening?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess my advice that I always put out there is like, it's a numbers game. Literally, it's like, I would say kind of like, if I were to put it into like software engineering terms, like, when you enter like a code and stuff like that, and you try to run it and see if it works, and you get the error, and you kind of like pivot to see, where your errors went wrong.
Yeah.
It's going to be like that for your resume itself. Like, so let's say you updated your resume, and then you start applying to 50 jobs. From there, if you haven't heard back from anything, like you haven't gotten a reply from a recruiter, anything like that, so it's just like ghost town, like silent, then I would say, let's review your resume again, and then update it again, and have someone else take a look at it. And then from there, you just kind of pivot your resume so that way it keeps on getting better, like iterative improvements over time, because you don't want to fix your resume once and then from there apply to 400 jobs, and you're like, well, I applied to a lot of jobs, why didn't I get anything? And so that's why you want to keep on improving little by little, whether that's like asking someone new to review your resume, because everyone has a different take on what a resume should look like. So that's one of like the biggest advice.
Feedback loops, basically.
Exactly.
Your resume, feedback loops.
Exactly, because sometimes like one person can say something, like some person would be like, you gotta have more numbers within your resume, and another person would be like, you have too much numbers in your resume. So you want to make sure that you're able to balance between the two, like the feedback, of course, as you're moving along.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I would say too is, I guess, reach out to your network. It's the other big thing. I hate to say it, but like, our industry works in like a nepotism kind of way, because like it's essentially to get like jobs and to get the interviews and things like that, and you want to know like the recruiter, you want to know someone who works there, so that they can at least put your resume in front of a recruiter or a hiring manager, so that way they can have at least review it as soon as possible, instead of having a hiring manager and recruiter review 800 applicants at at once and only spending like 7 seconds on your resume or something like that.
Okay, so it would kind of like put yourself out there to the position that you applied for and reach out to the recruiter. You mean okay.
Yeah.
That's great advice, because the only advice that I answered with that I felt most comfortable sharing was reach out to your network. Connections is the best way to get a job, I feel like, even before all the layoffs, right? So I feel like that has not changed. But I didn't say that. I didn't even think about like putting yourself out there to the recruiter, reach out like, hey, I applied for this job. That's what you meant, right? Like, yeah. Make yourself known,
Yeah. It's pretty much the industry of networking at this point is based on who you know.
Yeah, that's great advice. Wow, I didn't think about that. That's awesome. Yeah. Okay, cool. So these are the next few questions are like, as a manager, from your experience, how do you handle promotions and what does that path look like?
Yeah. I guess with the promotions, it depends on the company you work for, right? Like, if you want to follow the guidelines and stuff like that. And so, like, let's say, I'm not too sure if you share with your viewers about the consulting, like, promotions. So we have, like, when I say we, Part Beta has these guidelines of what we call expectations framework, that you kind of base, your skill sets off of, like, your accomplishments. Are you meeting the benchmark of, this particular level? And so each company have their own type of expectations framework. Some are more broad, some are more specific. Like, I know other companies would like, have you contributed to, X, Y, or Z project, and has that been successful based on your metrics? So that's like super specific. Other companies are more broad, like, have you coached someone? Have you, deployed to production? Like super broad and things like that. So it depends. But from my perspective, in terms of like helping people get promoted, that's the whole point of an engineering manager, is to be able to give your teammates the opportunity to get promoted. So what I usually do is have one-on-ones with my team members on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. And typically in those one-on-ones, I would ask them, like, are you having fun with the stuff that you're doing? Is the stuff that you're doing interesting? Things like that. And then after that, I would lead to asking them about their career path. Where do they see themselves in a year? Where do they see themselves in 2 years? Are they looking more towards like the technical path, or they're looking more towards like the leadership path? More so like, people management. Because in the industry, there's typically 2 pathways that you can take. You want to become a principal engineer, or you want to go down the path of people management, like engineering manager, director of engineering, and things like that, because those are 2 different skill sets that you would need to develop. And so based on that, I would ask them like, okay, looks like, you want to go down the technical pathway, right? And so from there, we will work towards actually adding some of those, stories into our sprint planning to actually give them the opportunity to develop those skill sets. So let's say that they're interested in becoming a back-end expert or like a subject matter expert in, APIs and stuff like that. Then we want to make sure that, in the next 2 sprint, we want to have some back-end stories, not filled with like front-end stories or things like that. So that way, when we do sprint planning, they can be like, oh, I want to take that on and develop it. And so that kind of helps them with building their internal resume, if you were to call it, for their accomplishments. So that way, when review time comes around, they would actually have something that they can talk about that they did, that relates to their career path. And so there's that. And then there's one other thing that I like to do for promotion is actually create an accomplishments page that is shared between me and the team member. So we utilize Confluence heavily within our organization. And so I usually create like a Confluence document. You can think of it like Google Docs or something. And then every week or so, I would have asked my team members, would you be able to update the document with some of the accomplishments that you've done, even if it's super small. Like, for example, I made a PR to add a button on this particular page, and then the other thing that I would say is have a section for business impact. So like, why did we add a button there? So for example, in this particular team member, we added a donate button to our website to ultimately drive value and get more revenue. And so that's what, that person would actually put within that line. So that way, when we review it, we can show like, higher ups, the directors, and be like, we can justify their promotion type of thing so that they can get a better raise or a better title.
That they deserve.
Exactly.
Okay. That's cool. So you do that weekly?
Or bi-weekly sometimes if, it depends on the team members. Like some team members like to have weekly one-on-ones. Others just like don't want to have too much meetings.
Yeah. Okay. And so you went down the engineering manager path, right?
Yeah.
And that's what you wanted versus like tech.
Exactly.
Like technical. Okay. That's cool. Is it because you like people?
No, it's more of like, I think at some point...
you don't like people?
I do like talking to people. I think part of me is like, once you become a senior engineer, you kind of have a fork in the road. You want to continue on becoming a better technical person. That means diving deeper into the code and like leading technically. Like, why do we want to have this architecture instead of this architecture?
Right.
But on the people side, if you like kind of helping other team members grow and succeed, that's where I enjoy the aspect. When I was like a senior engineer, yeah, exactly. On the project, I was helping like a couple junior engineers grow in terms of like, how do you set up a repo? How do you build this particular API? And then from there, like, I saw them grew like within like 3 or 4 months span, and they were able to do it on their own. Like, after 4 months, I was like, oh, that's super amazing and super cool.
Yeah.
And so that kind of led me to be like, maybe this is where I want to head, because I really enjoy that aspect of people management or people mentoring and stuff like that. Whereas I didn't want to code too much anymore, per se, and so that's where like people who enjoy more of like heads down coding would like to go down the technical route.
Yeah. You felt fulfilled, like watching them grow out of something that like you helped them reach that point, right?
Exactly.
I do like that too. And right now I'm kind of in the middle of learning how to be an architect, like the diagramming, like all that good stuff. And I'm enjoying it too. So I don't know. I've always thought I was going to be like a manager that way, versus a technical person. But what I'm doing is pretty cool. I'm enjoying it.
I mean, the architect is still pretty cool. Like, I'm not saying like I don't diagram or architect anymore. I still do.
Oh, you still do? Okay. So you do. You're just more focused on the people aspect.
Yeah, I would say focus on the people aspect and be like the person who's unblocking team members. Like, so we still have like senior engineers within our team to be able to build and architect things, but kind of there as a second eye to support them. Like, maybe have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? So I think from that side of things, like if you were to put it, an engineering manager would be more of like, how can I help my team so I can multiply their productivity? And then the technical person, like let's say if you're a staff engineer or a principal engineer, you think more on the terms of like, how can I create this architecture so that way, it can be scalable and maintainable in the future. So you're more closer to the code base. So that way, in essence, both sides, you're still increasing productivity, but in different ways. So engineering manager, you're increasing productivity by ensuring your people are enjoying the work that they're doing. Talking to like directors, project managers, making sure that you're protecting the team so that they're not dragged into too many meetings. Whereas, the staff or principal engineer or even architect are the person who's making sure that they're safeguarding the code base, so that you're not introducing, tech debt or features that are not going to be usable in the future.
Okay. Oh, that's a great explanation. Okay, that makes sense. I didn't know you were still doing diagramming, so that made it clear.
Yeah.
Oh, you do a lot of work.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it varies too. Like, I do want to caveat that like each organization runs their, I guess, pathways differently.
Yeah.
And so sometimes an engineering manager will also be coding too.
Right.
And vice versa. Like, you know, principal engineer might be coaching other senior engineers and stuff like that.
That makes sense. All right, so moving on to the second question for as a manager question. How do you motivate your team? And I really like that question. I'm curious to know.
That's a really hard question, actually. Like, I actually had to read like a book before actually becoming an engineering manager.
Before you became
yeah, like for me, like I think it was called the Manager's Path by Camille Fourier. Maybe I'm mispronouncing her name, but it essentially talks about how you become a good manager. Because in my experiences, I had some pretty bad ones.
You think so?
I think so. You know, I took a mental note about, you know, what type of manager I want to be and don't want to be. And so like I took that to heart. Like anytime someone, you know, was managing me during my time when I was a software engineer that I didn't like, I knew for sure that that's something I didn't want to do. So an example would be like, I had one instance where I think I already told you this in our casual conversations, but I was writing code a specific way, and during this, you know, this feature development, we didn't have any linter or like, you know, prettier enabled within our repository, so like anyone can write like whatever they want. So, you know, sometimes you got like a 2-tab, or like a tab as a spacing, or a 2-space as a spacing. So we didn't have that standardized.
The format prettier is just basically making the code look pretty.
Exactly. Exactly. So a way to standard, like, you know, some people would do like a semicolon at the end or not, or some people don't. So going back to this example, one of my managers was, you know, telling me to develop this feature, and I was developing it, works fine, tested it and everything like that. But he had like, you know, an issue with my code not being super pretty, per se. And so when I went on vacation, he ended up like making an RPR to update my code to make it into his standard. And so when I came back, I had like an issue, like, was something wrong with my code? And I started doubting myself, like, was it not good enough for you, type of thing? But I realized that's not my fault, because, you know, it kind of falls on the manager. Why did you do it without like talking to me or the team about it? So I knew that one from that experience, like when I'm a manager, I'm never gonna do something that would kind of instill that self-doubt in an engineer. And two would be like, in most of my code bases, I will add a prettier or a lint formatter, so that way we don't have to have the same discussion. So things like that, learning from my past experiences, so that way future engineers don't have to go through what I go through. So that's, I guess, kind of leans into like how do I, you know, motivate my team members, just making sure that they feel appreciated and stuff like that. Another way that I kind of help them with that essentially is through one-on-ones I was talking about. During my one-on-ones, in addition to asking about their career path, I tend to ask, you know, how are they doing, you know, mentally, physically, emotionally. Just make sure that, you know, if they're not doing well, like I want to make sure that they have someone to vent to or rant to, or someone just to listen to their problems, even if it's personal and things like that. Because at the end of the day, you're a person, right? Like, you know, sometimes your personal life does affect your work life. And some managers don't see that. And some people don't want to share that with, you know, your team members. But as long as, you know, I know about it, I can kind of support them, like whether give them easier tasks during the sprint, or ask them like, hey, maybe it's good to take some time off just to do whatever you need to do. Or if you're sick too, like you don't have to go to work, you know, like just make sure your mental health is like, or physical health is good. So things like that. And then the other thing I like to do is like, when I first meet them, is like ask them like, how do you want to be recognized? Actually, I learned this from my previous manager. She was like super cool and like kind of like brought this on to me. Like how do you want to be recognized? Like, are you a person who likes words of affirmation? You know, kind of going back to the 5 love languages that you can kind of apply to work. Like for example, words of affirmations. Like, are you a person who likes to hear that you're doing a great job? And things like that. Or are you a person who cares more about like gifts, right? Like, you know, if you complete like a project, you want to be rewarded monetarily, right? Or through other things. What's up? Oh, dude. Bonuses, you know, like if you deliver a project, you get some bonus.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I remember our mentor, when he finished his project, he took the team out to like $1,000 meal or something like that.
Yeah.
That
Mentor, I'm looking right at you. Why didn't I get that? Okay.
I didn't get it either, so.
You didn't get it? What do you mean?
I wasn't on his project,
so. Because you can't.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, okay, well, that's cool. But anyways, it's kind of going off of that. So there's different ways to kind of motivate your team too. So there's that, and then some people actually don't want to be publicly recognized. Like, sometimes you want to be like, thanks to person A, person B, we were able to get this done out the door. Some people don't like that. So that's what I learned through my experiences. And so I always want to ask them, like, if you like words of affirmation, do you want to be, recognized publicly or privately? So there's that way. Like, if they're privately, anytime they do like a good presentation or a good demo, I would just message them privately, like, really great job. I think you did great on this and X, Y, and Z. So there's that. And then I guess another way to motivate my team members is through social events. I guess sometimes people do like it, sometimes people don't, but that's where I survey the team to see if they want to have a social event, because you don't want to have forced socialization, of course. And so some of these social events could be like playing games together, or like just hanging out and then getting free lunch, essentially, just throughout like the week. So that way we can separate out like from sprints to sprints, because sometimes, for me at least, I don't know about you, but whenever we go from sprint to sprint, like ending a sprint, starting a sprint, it sometimes doesn't feel like there's a separation of like, you're living in the moment of like, oh, let's reflect and like, oh, we did a great job. And then it's just everything moves so fast. Yeah. And so having that kind of break helps with like team morale and stuff like that.
Yeah. Like celebrating your accomplishments.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think that's important too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Especially if it's a really busy project.
Yeah. Oh, that's how, like, if you have those busy projects, you get so burnt out.
Yeah. Man, burnout.
Yeah, you talked about that in your videos.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next category, which are more general tech questions. Mm-hmm. Well, actually, there's just one. But are there any programming languages I should focus on in order to land my first job in the industry? And this, I guess, I know what you're going to say. It depends, right? Because I would have that same answer too. But I got this question a lot, actually. And I forgot to include this in the previous Q&A video that I made. But yeah, it depends, right? For web development, you're working with different, you could be working with different languages. Although you can basically do everything with TypeScript now, pretty much. Yeah. A lot of things. Yeah. But anyway, your answer.
Yeah, I would second what you're saying. Like, it really depends too. I guess for your first job, I would, if I were like your mentor or whatever, I would kind of follow up with, what do you want to do, right? Like, have you thought about what industries you like? There's so many pathways in the tech world that you can do different things, but that requires different skill sets, of course. So let's say like game development, right? Like, that requires a whole new set of skills. Like, I can't ever just break into the game development world without learning those skills. So for example, if you go to like game development, you need to know C++, you need to know math, you need to know your physics, which I suck at completely.
Yep, but I can't.
But so that's one. And then like, if you just want to go to the generic like full stack engineering, as I'm guessing that's what the intention of this question was, just to get like a junior engineer position or whatnot, I would say just learn a language, something like an easier language that you can kind of build off of. So like, I'm biased because I learned Python first, because that's what our university taught. And so Python is like super easy to grasp because you don't have to deal with all these like complex, like, I guess, what do you call it? Types.
TypeScript was tough at first, honestly, if you don't know what you're doing.
Exactly. Yeah. So you don't have to worry about all the types. You don't have to worry about memory leaks and stuff like that. And so you just be able to kind of get a gist of what programming is. And Python, you can do so many different things too. Like,
you can even do machine learning.
Exactly. That's the whole like ideal of machine learning. It's like the AI stuff if you ever want to get into AI, Python is the way to go because they have so many libraries on creating machine learning models and stuff like that. You can also write web applications with Python. Like
I haven't done that before, but yes, you can.
Because there's like something called like Flask, things like that. You can generate like Python to web apps. You can write visualizations, things like that. So it's just a good general thing that you can go into the back end or the front end side of things. But if you're a person who likes like the UI, the prettiness of things, then that would lean towards more of like web development. So that would go more towards like HTML, CSS. Those are not necessarily programming languages per se, but they are a huge backbone of web development. So like learning JavaScript it's kind of comparable to learning Python first. JavaScript and TypeScript, if you were to say it like.
I'm more used to TypeScript now. And it is a little different. TypeScript is based off of JavaScript. And it's okay. I remember when you were helping me for the interview, right? You asked what is the benefit of using TypeScript, and let me tell you, it is very beneficial to know that, like, to actually define the types of your variables or whatever, anything that you're typing up for web development, because if something is not of the same type, then it'll show you there's an error, which is great because in JavaScript it doesn't, right? Like you could be passing in a completely different format of your parameter and it's not gonna work properly because it's not the correct type, you know?
Yeah.
So it's insane. I hated the errors, okay? And don't just type any. It's not an any type, okay? That's bad practice. That's really bad practice. Yeah, just don't type any. I know that's a shortcut. Yeah, but
exactly.
Anyway.
If you type any, it's just like using JavaScript at that point.
Basically, and you're just typing a type because you have to. It's TypeScript.
Yeah, it's like you're forced to, or you can't build or compile or whatever.
Yeah. But TypeScript is very beneficial, especially for larger, complex applications. Yeah.
Exactly.
Where were we going with this?
I was going to say the differences, but like, I was going to say that's why I say learn JavaScript first instead of TypeScript, because it's a little bit more complex than JavaScript. And so I would say like level 2 is like TypeScript. So just learn JavaScript first if you want to go into that route, because again, JavaScript can be used for the backend too. Because if you're going to go into like cloud computing, like Amazon Web Services, like AWS, you can build some of your cloud functions or like a lot of those things with JavaScript or Node.js. And then, sorry, I'm adding some other names, but Node.js is essentially the package manager for JavaScript. So that way you can use like a variety of different libraries to do different things like visualization and stuff. So those are the two ones I've mentioned. And so I would say go off of those two. If you enjoy one or the other, then keep on going with it, because once you learn one of them, you essentially learn all of them, because they kind of follow the same framework essentially, because like you have your variables, you have your for loops, you have your if statements,
your functions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's like as long as you learn those concepts, you can apply to other programming languages and they're going to work the same way. The only difference is what we call the syntax. Yeah, thank you. And you just have to look up on Google, like, how do you write this and that, and it'll come out.
Yeah, to be quite honest, I know TypeScript, I'm comfortable with it, but sometimes I still have to ask Google, how do you write this? What's the syntax for this? For interviewing, I feel like pseudocode is enough. Even if it's like the wrong syntax, they understand what you're getting at, that kind of thing. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think so. And that's where it comes out when you're interviewing. You want to be able to kind of describe what you're doing as you're doing it. So like if you're preparing for interviews, you just want to be like, I'm writing this if statement here because I want to make sure that I'm capturing this, business case, things like that. So I definitely agree with that. Or like, I sometimes also use ChatGPT too, to be honest.
Amazing tool, honestly.
Yeah, like I know for sure AI, like, well, maybe I'm backtrack. AI won't take our jobs at least for the next 10 years or so as software engineers, but people who actually know how to use AI will be a lot more productive. So instead of like, searching on Google all the time, being like, how do I write a function to kind of sort this data array? You can just ask that in, ChatGPT, and they'll give you the actual code. And then from there, you can just kind of like shift it around to fit your own code base. So that way you can be a little bit more productive. So that way you don't have to spend like hours figuring out the algorithm.
Yeah, and it's like you're kind of, when I research, at least I had to research a lot and like read through all Stack Overflow answers and see which one would work best with me, and then I piece it together and kind of trial and error, And with ChatGPT, you still do trial and error because sometimes ChatGPT does give you the wrong thing, but just be aware of that. Confirm that before you use it, but also if you use it, there's also trial and error, right? If it gives you an error, well, then you solve that error, and then but the thing is, ChatGPT saved you a lot of time on researching like different websites, and it's great. And sometimes I just talk to ChatGPT like like about the work, of course, and if I have more questions about it, like, what does this mean, what did, when you said like a certain word that I didn't understand, what does this mean? Then you continue the conversation that way, and I learn a lot more really quickly too. So it's useful. So
+1 to that. I like these AI tools that came out. Like, I think there's the GitHub Copilot and stuff like that too.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, it's like, I think there's also a VS Code extension
for AI. What?
Yeah, and then sometimes like, it also, of course, to make sure that like it follows your IT policies and procedures, of course. But sometimes like you can have like Copilot and be like, what does this code do? Especially when you're dealing with legacy code and you don't know what the heck is going on. Because I have times when I don't know what's going on, and you'd be like, can you describe what this part of code does? Because sometimes they don't leave comments and they use variables like I or J or K, and you're like,
it's not clear.
Exactly. And so
this is why documentation is important.
Yes. Okay. Documentation.
Yeah. Don't forget. Don't just ignore documentation, because if you pass on your code to someone else, they're not gonna know what the hell you're talking about. What were you doing? Just like you said.
Exactly.
Yeah. Comments are important. And I noticed that ChatGPT, when you ask to write a function or something, it will leave the comments for you, and it's mainly to like tell you what's going on.
Exactly.
Right? But it's really useful, and I think it's good practice the way it does it too.
Exactly. I think so too. It just helps in general, because I think I learned the hard way is that you will never be the person who will maintain the code for the rest of your life. You will pass it. You will always pass it to someone else, and like, especially as consultants, you're never gonna be the one who sees the end product. You're gonna be passing it to the people who actually do things.
Those were great tips, actually. But that was the last question. And well, thank you guys for reaching out with those questions. Thank you. I appreciate it. Hope these answers were helpful in your job search, or just like if you were curious on a hiring manager's perspective on these things. Awesome. Okay, well, that concludes this video. Thank you so much for traveling all the way here just for this interview. I appreciate it. He brought all the lights, this whole setup, basically because of him. But thank you. And I'll link his channel down below in the description box, as well as somewhere on the screen. Click on the card. I'll put in a card to his channel. He does all tech stuff, videos, and advice, so go check him out. Yeah.
Thanks for having me here. It's always fun to hang out with you. And if you have any questions that I kind of shared, just feel free to also message me as well.
And LinkedIn too. Yeah. There are a lot of people reaching out to him and myself as well. So if you had any more questions, comment them down below or reach out to us on LinkedIn. I'll have both of our information in the description box. But yeah, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.
Nice.